conference right now.
The anterior inner neck structures were absent, not received with the body. The trachea and the laryngeal cartilage, the thyroid horn, and the hyoid bone were not received.
The anterior inner neck structures were absent, not received with the body. The trachea and the laryngeal cartilage, the thyroid horn and the hyoid bone were not received with the body. Therefore, this pathologist cannot rule out injury to the neck as a contributor or a cause of death. That is not a line from a horror screenplay. That is a direct quote from an independent autopsy report read aloud at a press conference. An 18-year-old college football player vanishes on July 4th from a remote island. Days later, his body is recovered. His family, desperate for answers, commissions a second autopsy, and when the body arrives, the most critical pieces of evidence, the very structures that would tell you if someone was choked, strangled, or struck in the throat, are simply gone. Imagine handing over a car for independent mechanical inspection after a fatal crash, and the steering column has been removed. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Trial Theory Unsealed, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. That press conference, delivered by attorney Ben Crump at the NAACP convention, was supposed to be a moment of transparency. Instead, it opened a procedural chasm. The independent pathologist, Dr. Roger Mitchell, received a body that had already been dissected by the state. Standard protocol, yes, the state performs the first examination. But what is not standard, what triggered the forensic alarm, is that the state medical examiner retained the neck structures, the strap muscles, the esophagus, the trachea, the hyoid bone, without telling the family, without telling the independent examiner, and without providing a report on what they found. The hyoid bone is a small U-shaped bone in the throat. In a young, healthy athlete, it does not break easily. When it does, the presumption is manual strangulation.
To remove them, whenever an autopsy is performed, we are removing those internal structures so that we can further examine them, not only from a visual standpoint, but from a microscopic standpoint as well. Now, when we look at the neck muscles, we look at what's called the strap muscles. So if you just to give you an idea, these are your strap muscles, okay? But right here sits your esophagus, sits your trachea, sits your hyoid bone. They specifically mentioned that the hyoid bone was not included in the body when the independent examiner received it. That's a significant point for me because that means that they are checking to see if the strap muscles had hemorrhaging, meaning signs of strangulation. Petechial hemorrhaging is very important, but also bleeding into those muscles. The hyoid bone, examining that bone, being able to remove the soft tissue from it to check for signs of trauma, like a fracture to that bone, is crucial when you're thinking about possible strangulation or someone being choked.
The state is holding the only piece of evidence that can confirm or eliminate that possibility. They sent everything else, but they kept the neck. Why?
Extremely disappointed that an independent autopsy was not performed from the beginning. Yes, the state has a responsibility to perform the autopsy, but even the county coroner said, I want no parts of it. I'm sending this to the state ME's office. So if they were going to do that, they should have given this family the option from the beginning to have an independent autopsy, because things are missing from this independent autopsy that as a mother, as a community member, don't sit right with me. Number one, if you were going to hold back any parts of the body, I feel as if the independent examiner should have known that from the beginning, and a report of what those findings were should have been sent to him. Yes, it is customary to hold back pieces of the body if you're going to examine them further, but why? What was there that you needed to examine? And
consider the cascading failures. The local coroner recused himself immediately, saying, quote, I want no parts of it. I'm sending this to the state's office. That is an abdication, not a perceived.
Here's what I think. Listening to them respond about the condition of his body and what they believed could have happened to Nolan without even getting to the examination of his body is concerning. How can you assume that there was no foul play? How can you assume that this was an accidental drowning and you have not even completed the autopsy yet? That would have been mistake number one to point out in this case, not only from a perspective of being a parent, but also just as the coroner. I meet with our law enforcement and tell them, hey, please do not release this type of information without talking to me first, because I don't want the family to think that we're hiding anything from them. I want them to know. And Nolan deserves to have the story of his death told, no matter how harsh it may be, no matter how benign it may be. He deserves.
The state then reportedly suggested, before completing its own investigation, that this was likely an accidental drowning. The independent pathologist cannot confirm drowning because he cannot examine the airway structures or the stomach contents. The state has them. The family has silence. The body had a 12 by 8-inch red discoloration.
Asked for this help.
So now the family has their independent autopsy results, and here is what that medical examiner, that pathologist, found.
Preliminary report, second autopsy, death of Nolan Xavier Wells. Cause of death, undetermined, pending investigation. The manner of death, undetermined, pending investigation. Focal area of red discoloration in the soft tissue of the back of the head, the occipital region. He said the etiology is unknown at this time. He said the body was received after the initial autopsy. He said the body had marked decompensation.
So what do you hear? Cause undetermined, manner undetermined, this red discoloration on the back of the head. But this is where it gets interesting. So according to Ben Crump, he claimed the United Cajun Navy found Nolan fully clothed, face down, even though Crump pointed out
across the occipital bone, the back of the skull, a focal point of impact. That discoloration is antemortem, meaning it happened while the heart was still beating. You don't bruise after you die.
Could that be someone hit Nolan? Something happened to him and that mark would still be there, just assuming, or do you think it could be something that happened after he died?
I think it's probably before, especially because there seemed to be the discoloration as it was described. And again, you have someone who is a non-medical professional reading an autopsy report, which I also completely disagree with, because it muddies the waters. He really should have had either Dr. Mitchell or an assistant, someone with medical training and knowledge, to read this autopsy report. But I digress. The discoloration that they discussed, just want to make sure I'm quoting them correctly in what they stated, said it was a 12 by 8-inch red discoloration overlaying the occipital bone. So I think that's significant because this shows a blow from behind. No matter whether or not it caused intracranial hemorrhage or not, we know that there was no underlying skull fracture associated with it. So the fact that this happened to him, we know that this was a ante-mortem thing,
and yet the manner of death remains undetermined. The cause of death remains undetermined. And the state's official autopsy report has not been released to the family or the public.
About this. Number one, the fact that those, I hate to say it, those pieces of Nolan's body are missing, does that mean you can't even determine whether this was an accidental drowning?
Exactly, because I need to know when they received that body at that first examination, was there water in the airway? Was there debris in the airway? What were the contents of his stomach? Were there pills there? Was there alcohol there? Was there food there? That gives me a timeline on when Nolan may have last eaten. What was he drinking? I'm examining the contents of his stomach. How was his body found? Was he found actually in a body of water, truly inside of the water, or was he just on the shoreline? All of these things matter greatly when you are doing a water death, especially.
So if the first examiner, right, removed those body parts, does that suggest that they may have a conclusion, that when the state ME's report comes out with the toxicology findings, they may have a conclusion whether or not there was foul play, whether there was trauma to that region, whether there was drowning, that the fact that they removed those pieces would suggest they may have an answer?
They sent everything.
So what happens when a family trusts the state to tell the story of their son's death, and the state withholds the final chapter? This is the ticking clock question that transforms this case from a local tragedy into a national stress test of forensic accountability. What if the toxicology report comes back clean, and the neck structures show hemorrhage. And the only agency that knew that sat on the information while a $100,000 reward accumulated and the FBI began monitoring threats tied to the case. How long does the state wait before the decision to withhold becomes a decision to conceal? They sent everything else, but they kept the neck. This is the moral refrain that sits beneath the entire independent autopsy finding. The family's pathologist stated plainly that he cannot rule out foul play. Not that he suspects it, not that he accuses it, but that the state's failure to provide the full body has rendered a conclusive independent determination impossible. He cannot rule out injury. He cannot rule out strangulation. He cannot rule out homicide.
Just cannot rule out if any intervening non-accidental factors contributed to or caused the death of Nolan Wells. Understand, he's saying based on the examination of the body, he cannot rule out foul play. That is significant. With the following questions still outstanding, number one, what were the circumstances that led to Nolan Xavier Wells entering the water? Number two, what was the body position when it was found? Number three, was there water in the airway? Remember he talked about the lungs and the airways. Were they filled with water? Number four, is there any evidence of injuries to the anterior neck structure? We got the autopsy without his neck. We got the body without his neck at the time of the second autopsy. Number five, is there any evidence of any intracranial hemorrhaging? He said that is going to be very significant. Things that he could not observe at autopsy that the initial medical examiner would have been able to observe. Number six, was the composition of what was the composition of the stomach contents? He talks about that being important because when was he found? How long had he been in the water? How long had it been since his last meal? All those things become relevant factors when you're trying to do a thorough and impartial autopsy. And number seven, what are the toxicology report findings? He said the best classification again for the cause and manner of death for Nolan Xavier Wells is undetermined pending investigation.
The official classification remains undetermined pending investigation. But whose investigation? The same medical examiner's office that shipped a partial body across state lines and then went radio silent.
I think their option is to respond. I think it's the only right thing to do. The fact that they have chosen not to respond, the fact that they've chosen not to be transparent and to share information, it's not just a failure of duty, but it's a betrayal of public trust. The public trusts you to tell the story about how people died, whatever that truth may be. And if they have something, they need to talk with the family. They don't need to have a press conference about it. They don't need to talk to anyone else but that family. And tell the family, hey, I want to share this with you, but I need you guys to not share this until we get all of the reports back. That's a very simple ask. This mother and father want to know what happened to their son.
They sent everything else, but they kept the neck. The reward now stands at $125,000 for information leading to a conviction.
That got everyone's attention. A $50,000 reward for information leading to a conviction in Nolan Wells' case. Perry matched it on the spot. $100,000 now. That's the total for whoever knows something that could lead to a potential conviction here. Assuming for the moment, by the way, that a crime was committed. The FBI has stepped in. They're looking into threats that were tied to.
The FBI is investigating ancillary threats. A grand jury may be convened. And the family still does not have the one thing that the state possesses but will not share: the physical truth extracted from Nolan's own tissue. The independent report lists 7 outstanding questions.
Still outstanding. Number 1, what were the circumstances that led to Nolan Xavier Wells entering the water? Number 2, what was the body position when it was found? Number 3, was there water in the airway? Remember, he talked about the lungs and the airways, were they filled with water? Number 4, is there any evidence of injuries to the anterior neck structure? We got the autopsy without his neck. We got the body without his neck at the time of the second autopsy. Number 5, is there any evidence of any intracranial hemorrhaging? He said that is going to be very significant, things that he could not observe at autopsy that the initial medical examiner would have been able to observe. Number 6, was the composition of what was the composition of the stomach contents? He talks about that being important because when was he found? How long had he been in the water? How long had it been since his last meal? All those things become relevant factors when you're trying to do a thorough and impartial.
Circumstances leading to water entry, body position when found, water in the airway, neck injuries, intracranial hemorrhage, stomach contents, toxicology. Every single answer to those questions sits in the custody of a state agency that has not held a single press conference to explain itself. They sent everything else, but they kept the neck. Now the question moves from the autopsy suit to the public record. You can read the independent preliminary report yourself. It has been released by the family's legal team and is available through the NAACP's press distribution and multiple public court filings. Pull it up, read the section on the absent anterior neck structures. Then ask yourself one direct question in the comments below. If the state's examination found no evidence of foul play.
That's the least that they could do is respond and say, this is why we're saying there's no foul play. This is how we've concluded this.
And I'm curious, look, if there really is a divergence between what that medical examination is and what is here, I mean, it's already going to raise a lot of questions. This presser is going to raise a lot of questions. The toxicology findings, how much is that going to help fill in the blanks?
I don't know that it will. If there's nothing there, then it's non-contributory to the cause of death. But what if there is something there? This is a student athlete. This is someone who prided himself on his athletic ability and staying healthy to play football. This was a first love for him.
Why hasn't the state released its own autopsy report to prove it? If you want more investigations like this that follow the documents, not the statements, like this video, share it. Subscribe to Trial Theory Unsealed, and turn on notifications. We follow the evidence wherever it leads, even when the evidence itself is missing.